Today's lesson about tides asks you to consider what causes tides and the differences between different types of tides. Your objective is to explain the role of gravity in causing the tides. Tides are the daily rise and fall of ocean surfaces. This is definitely something you need to record in your notes. What happens is the tide comes in, so the level of the water on the beach rises, and as the tide goes out, the level of the water on the beach goes down. As you can see, when the tide comes in, that yellow arrow, the height of the water goes up and stops at high tide, and it goes out and stops at low tide. The frequency of these tides, so between high tide and high tide, you have about 12.5 hours between them. So it will rise for 6 hours from low to high, and then it will fall for 6 hours from high to low. So that's one cycle. You have 2 of those cycles every day. High tide, this is also for your notes, is the maximum height reached by the rising tide. As you notice, the boat on this high tide picture is floating on the water. And next, when we get to low tide, which is the minimum height of the falling tide, at least in this situation, the water is totally out to sea. So the boat is stranded on the sand. So we'll have to wait until the tide comes back in to be able to move. Let's get into what causes this to happen. Why does the water rise and fall? It is mostly due to the gravitational force between the moon and the water on Earth. The gravitational force pulls the water more on those sides lined up with the moon. So you have this kind of bulge. As Earth rotates every day, different places on the planet's surface pass through the areas of the tidal bulge. But that bulge is always going to be facing towards the moon. When the place that you are on Earth is passing through that tidal bulge, you will see high tide. When you pass through the places where there's no bulge, you experience, or the sea experiences, low tide. Notice how they are facing away from the moon. In addition to the moon, the sun also affects our tides. But why does the sun also have an effect? Because it's so massive. However, as you know, as the distance gets farther apart or greater, the gravitational force weakens. So the sun actually has less of an effect on the tides than the moon because the moon is so close to the Earth. With the Earth, the sun, and the moon all moving around each other throughout a month, when the relationship in their positions changes, the heights of the tides also are affected. So as you can see, we have the sun over here, the Earth in the middle, and then as the moon orbits the Earth, at different phases of the moon, we're actually going to have different effects on the tide. So one of those types of tides that we talk about is the spring tide. It occurs 2 times per month during a full moon and a new moon. So as a quick review, a full moon is when the moon is on the other side of the Earth from the sun. So we see the light reflecting off the moon, and it looks like it's fully bright. It also happens on a new moon when the moon is between the sun and the Earth, so we see the shadowed side of the moon. So it looks like we can't see the moon that night. Talking about the tides, you have the highest high tides and the lowest low tides. You can see there's barely any bulge on the top and the bottom of this image. There's your low tide and there's your high tide regions. Now take a closer look. Because the sun, the moon, and the earth all form a straight line, the bulge due to the gravity of the moon and the bulge due to the gravity of the sun are all lined up. So you get an even higher high tide. Lastly, we have what's called a neap tide. Neap is when, or it occurs when, in between the spring tides and what we call the first quarter moon and the third quarter moon. So from the perspective of the earth, it looks like half of the moon is illuminated by the sun. What does this cause? It causes the high tides to still be high, but not as high. So we say that they are less high, and the low tide is less low. There we go, low tide. You can see there still is somewhat of a bulge because of the effect of the sun's gravity. But the high tide, again, as we talked about, is facing the moon. So the high tide is only due to the effect of the moon in this situation. And I just want to point out, this is something that you should be familiar with from math. The earth, the moon, and the sun form a right angle. So here's the sun. You can draw a straight line to the earth. And then you have to turn 90 degrees to get to the moon. You have a right angle, and that's when you get the kind of in-between tides. Here's one final picture just as a comparison between spring and neap tides. In the spring tide, everything is all lined up. And in the neap tide, you have a right angle.